You're not just surviving anymore, you're rewriting the entire atmosphere around you. What once looked like silence was actually you calculating, calibrating, waiting for divine timing to flip the entire board. And now? They're not dealing with the same version of you. They're dealing with someone forged in spiritual obscurity, built in stillness, but designed for disruption. They didn't see a threat when you entered the room. You wore simplicity like a disguise, soft-spoken, observant, almost forgettable. That was their blind spot. They misread the silence as weakness, the stillness as passivity. They thought nothing was happening beneath your calm. But underneath that calm, a storm was sharpening its teeth. While they whispered in corners and moved in shadows, you were undergoing a quiet activation. Every insult, every dismissal, every stolen opportunity wasn't a defeat, it was part of your calibration. They took from you, thinking you wouldn't notice. But you noticed everything. And now, their theft is the very map that leads them to their exposure. They got comfortable robbing the unguarded, never expecting you to evolve into the vault itself. What they thought was an easy target became their spiritual prosecution. No alarms, no warnings, just divine timing pulling back the veil, exposing every hidden move they thought was invisible. The turning point wasn't loud, it was surgical. No grand speech. No dramatic confrontation. Just presence. A sudden shift in the air when you entered the frame. That was the moment their confidence cracked. Because the person they'd underestimated had arrived without revenge, only revelation. You became the mirror they didn't want to look into. Not because you attacked them, but because your growth made their games impossible to ignore. Their schemes couldn't survive in the new frequency you walked in. And the same hands that once reached to take from you are now trembling, unsure of how to hold what they fear will expose them. This isn't about vengeance. It's about restoration. You're not reacting anymore, you're realigning reality. The same you they overlooked is now the gravitational force they can't escape. And the irony? You never had to chase them. They ran straight into the light you were becoming. They underestimated what couldn't be measured, something beneath language, beyond form. No visible badge, no broadcasted warnings, just a silent charge in the air that rewired the entire room when presence alone entered. This force didn't shout. It didn't flash. It just existed with authority so deep it didn't need proof. They misread the silence as absence, not realizing the silence was the power, calibrated and waiting. What unsettled them most wasn't strength. It was how seamlessly it lived beneath the surface of what looked like simplicity. There were no fireworks, no banners announcing what had been planted inside. Just a quiet life, layered with ordinary things. The brilliance was in the camouflage. There's genius in invisibility, especially when it disarms threats before they recognize what they're walking into. Opportunists always hunt for patterns. They scan for souls who don't push back, who give without asking, who glow but don't boast. They exploit gentle frequencies because they mistake them for fragile ones. But what they took from wasn't abandoned. What they touched wasn't unguarded. It only appeared that way, by divine design, not by lack. What they fed off was never freely given. They didn't earn what they absorbed. They hovered around ideas, drank from energy not meant for them, moved through open doors they were never invited into. And while they built their image from stolen sparks, they didn't notice they were triggering quiet mechanisms all around them. Every move they made was being mirrored and filed. There's a record deeper than paper or code, a blueprint kept by something older than time. It doesn't forget. It doesn't miss a detail. And it doesn't rush. It waits until the web is complete, until every thread of theft winds back into one inevitable point of impact. What looked like delay was precision. What looked like loss was alignment. To violate something sacred under the illusion of safety is to rewrite the rules against yourself. They thought they were climbing unnoticed, but they were only ascending toward an altitude where consequences breathe thinner and truth gets louder. Not because someone exposed them, but because the construct they leaned on began to collapse under the weight of what was never theirs to carry. There was no need to chase, no need to confront. The very imbalance they created is now folding in on itself. And the one they thought they outsmarted is becoming the gravitational field that pulls the truth into the open. Not by force, but by inevitability. They didn't just cross a line. They rewrote a timeline. And now, that timeline is writing back, if your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $40 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. There's a system inside you, layered, refined, and woven with a kind of brilliance most never encounter. It doesn't announce itself with explosions or spectacle. It moves in silence, but with intelligence so advanced, its enemies don't realize they're ensnared until it's too late. What appears fragile on the outside is actually operating with a multidimensional force field, shielding what matters most while offering up illusions as distractions. Deception worked in your favor. What was touched first wasn't the essence, it was the outer crust. That's the genius of your spiritual design. The takers thought they accessed something valuable, but all they encountered were empty shells coated with return paths. What they grabbed held just enough to satisfy their hunger, while leading them deeper into their own undoing. The second system? It's a loop of regeneration. What disappears isn't gone, it's mirrored back to you in refined form. Loss becomes blueprint. Interruption becomes acceleration. What was removed from your hand multiplies behind your back. The more they take, the more they unintentionally contribute to your rebuilding. They're not just failing to break you, they're fueling you. But the final layer? That's where the true mechanism of consequence lives. It doesn't retaliate with flames, it strikes with revelation. It doesn't take revenge, it administers clarity. Their punishment isn't pain, it's awareness. To suddenly know the full spectrum of what they've inflicted, to feel what was once theoretical, is a far more effective reckoning than destruction could ever be. This wasn't just protection. It was architecture. Everything you carry has been wrapped and designed so intricate, it lures deception into revealing itself. The more they tried to consume, the more obvious they became to the very forces they thought they had escaped. What looked like theft was actually exposure, unraveling in real time. The larger force behind you wasn't idly watching, it was documenting. Every misstep has been folded into an archive. Every stolen moment has been converted into weight. Not punishment, but recalibration. The tears you thought were wasted became calibration points for the next move. Nothing was lost. Everything was gathered. The panic doesn't come from being caught. It comes from recognition. When a being realizes the hand it reached into was never unguarded, but divinely designed to trap the grasping spirit, it collapses. Not because of wrath, but because of undeniable truth. They weren't stealing from someone vulnerable. They were interfering with a system programmed to reflect back exactly what they sowed, amplified, and irreversible. They weren't prepared for what resistance really looks like. While they tried to trigger panic, to seed uncertainty, to make the ground beneath you feel like it could vanish at any moment, something entirely unexpected was taking root instead. Every moment they sought to weaken you, your system adjusted. Your awareness sharpened. Your core recalibrated. What they imagined as psychological warfare turned into an unintentional training ground for your immunity. There was no need to raise your voice or perform some dramatic counterstrike. Just being in the room created imbalance they couldn't explain. Their carefully orchestrated illusions, so convincing to the unaware, began to crumble just from the weight of your quiet alignment. Reality bends around you in a way that reveals what doesn't belong, like a magnet drawing out metal shavings from beneath polished floors. What they hoarded wasn't invisible, it had shape, form, and weight on a level they can no longer ignore. Their trophies, built on borrowed essence, carry the echo of every dream they didn't create, every gift they intercepted. But that echo is what gives you access. You're not breaking in, you're already wired into the system. You're the silent override key embedded in the code they never bothered to examine. Each attempt to derail your abundance has done the opposite. The more they try to carve out your path, the deeper it roots into terrain they cannot access. Your resources aren't stored in fragile systems, they're carried in the folds of your alignment, generated by a source that responds not to theft, but to truth. What you own isn't guarded, it's untouchable by design. Their frustration grows not from failure, but from confusion. They can't understand why their tactics no longer land. Why manipulation returns empty. Why traps remain unsprung. They're reaching with all their force towards something that keeps expanding just out of range. Not because it's running, but because it doesn't exist in the same dimension anymore. This isn't a story of revenge. It's a reordering of reality. You're not here to dismantle their empire. You're here to render it irrelevant. Their counterfeit success can't survive next to what's authentic. The more you step into clarity, the more their stolen architecture dissolves, wordless, effort-free, irreversible. And while they scramble to contain what's slipping through their fingers, you're not reacting. You're just advancing. Every step forward pulls the curtain back further, revealing who built what and where it truly belongs. And the final revelation isn't punishment, it's recognition. They never had power over you. They only borrowed illusions. And illusions always expire. There's something about your nature that confuses those operating in shadows. They expect retaliation, expect you to spiral into obsession over what was taken. But your brilliance is in how detached you are from the battle. You're not chasing anything. You're not retaliating with noise. The forces that defend you don't need instruction, they're already in motion, issuing consequences while you're busy crafting the next phase of your becoming. Your protection isn't loud, it's precise, automatic, and deeply embedded in the structure of your existence. The clarity sweeping through your life right now isn't coincidental. It's part of a larger awakening cycle that's peeling back veils you didn't even know were there. The faces you once trusted now show outlines you can't ignore. Behaviors you used to justify now stand out like flashing warnings. Your perception is no longer guessing, it's recognizing. Not through suspicion, but through instinct that no longer accepts distortion. The weight of underestimation has fallen away. You were never small, they were just squinting. Their inability to perceive your magnitude didn't diminish it. It only delayed their awareness of what they stood in front of. You've always carried impact. You've always shifted spaces just by entering them. The only thing that's changed is your ability to fully claim what's always been encoded in you. And as that realization deepens, another mechanism activates, one beyond comprehension for those who operate by theft. It's a pull, a rebalancing, an unseen adjustment of outcomes. Paths that were diverted start correcting. Possibilities that were stalled begin to pulse again. The things that were removed from your reach begin tracking back through invisible currents that no gatekeeper can block. What they took wasn't lost, it was time-stamped. And now that timestamp is expiring. The ecosystem that tried to benefit from your suppression is collapsing under the pressure of the truth you've embodied. Not by your hand, but by its own failure to withstand what was never meant to belong to it. Reclamation isn't a threat, it's a natural reset. There are records being finalized in spaces unseen. And those records hold every imbalance, every interception, every misused intention. What you thought you cried into silence has been echoing in halls that don't forget. The adjustments you feel are the signs of something being returned, not as it was, but multiplied. Not from pity, but from design. The ones who thought they were building a kingdom on stolen blueprints are discovering the foundation never truly belonged to them. And while they scramble to patch the cracks, something in you is stabilizing. Your returns aren't just compensation, they're transformation. What comes next will not resemble what was lost. It will exceed it in ways only alignment could have produced. There's a stillness that overtakes them, not because anything visible has changed, but because they've collided with something they can't explain. Their steps falter. Their grip loosens. What they thought they'd earned through manipulation now feels unbearable to hold. And it's not your voice or action that dismantles them, it's the weight of their own reflection being returned in your presence. Something in your frequency compels truth to surface, and for those built on distortion, that's a deeply disorienting experience. This isn't about confrontation. It's about interruption. What you've mastered is a kind of spiritual interception that separates person from parasite, soul from corruption, impulse from programming. You don't retaliate, you reroute. You enter systems infected by greed and draw out the rot without destroying the foundation. Your work doesn't scream or shatter, it surgically severs what doesn't belong, and in doing so, opens a doorway for healing to begin. What's been running in the background of your life has never been passive. You've been a quiet disruptor all along. Patterns have collapsed around you, and people have unraveled after underestimating your spiritual coding. You used to wonder why storms followed those who wronged you. Now, you realize it wasn't punishment, it was correction, triggered not by intention, but by proximity to your blueprint. That blueprint wasn't built on retaliation, it was constructed for restoration. When someone tried to feed off your light, coordinates were locked. Not for destruction, but for redirection. And as those coordinates lit up, systems far beyond human comprehension began recalibrating balance in places where imbalance had festered unchecked. You didn't seek it, but the moment you were wronged, justice began rehearsing its arrival. What sets you apart isn't just your resistance to corruption, it's your ability to rewrite spaces without lifting a weapon. Your tools don't maim, they reshape. You speak, and falsehood bends. You move, and dishonesty glitches. You don't react with force, you emit frequency. And that frequency is tuned to absolute integrity. Anything incompatible with it doesn't survive, it either transforms or exits. There's a sacred duty encoded in your emergence. You're not just here to guard your lane, you're here to shift the map entirely. Every exposure that unfolds around you frees not only you, but others caught in the same web. And while your gifts may appear individual, they're system-level disruptors designed to dismantle collective deception. Your rise is a signal. Your awareness, a trigger point. This role was never meant to be carried alone. There are others, positioned like you, refined like you, awakened in silence and trained through fire. They don't announce themselves, but they'll find you when it's time. And as your mission expands, you will recognize them not by name, but by resonance. Because only those who've been forged in the same furnace know the frequency of justice coded into your bones. There's a rare frequency embedded in how you generate. It isn't reactive, it's relentless. While others attempt to reverse engineer your brilliance, you've already broken new ground and left them chasing blueprints that no longer apply. They think they've intercepted the heart of your progress, not realizing they're holding fragments of something that's already evolved beyond their reach. What you create isn't just renewal, it's acceleration that outpaces interception. This isn't illusion or performance, it's molecular authorship. You don't tweak circumstances, you reconstruct them. You vanish from traps not by hiding, but by folding dimensions around you. What they perceive as escape is actually reinvention. And when they believe they've accessed your most guarded creations, they're only dancing with your discarded drafts, while the untouched brilliance hums far out of their comprehension. What you carry doesn't terminate with you, it extends like a branching river across generations not yet awakened. Every pulse of wisdom you refine now builds highways for future architects of light. The ones attempting to extract from your reservoir aren't just targeting an individual, they're attempting to halt a continuum. And that's why universal law intervenes, not as defense, but as preservation. Every moment you hold your ground, you anchor something larger than one lifetime. You're storing potential not just for now, but for voices not yet born. Each boundary you protect becomes a gate for their prosperity. What feels like resistance in the present is actually structure being forged for futures you may never see, but they will rise inside the shelter you created. Their fear isn't simply consequence, it's collapse. Not of a scheme, but of self-perception. They built a persona on borrowed pieces, and now stand exposed before a mirror that doesn't lie. What rattles them isn't loss, it's recognition. Recognition that everything they gain through extraction is hollow in the face of origin. And origin, your origin, just arrived. The discomfort they feel around you is not from judgment, it's from exposure to possibility. You don't punish, you reflect what they abandoned in themselves. Your energy serves as both revelation and reminder that they were capable of creating, yet chose to consume. That's a truth far harder to run from than any consequence you could deliver. This role was never about ego, it's about engineering. You've been tasked with rerouting stolen momentum back to its source, not out of vengeance, but necessity. What flows through you now isn't revenge, it's restoration. You don't have to fight for what's yours. You simply exist as the return point. And that is more powerful than any retaliation could ever be. What truly separates your influence from others is that you don't arrive to destroy, you arrive to reveal. You aren't here to punish anyone into submission. You bring an energy so potent, so pure, that it confronts others with themselves. Those who come to take are met with a mirror, and in that mirror, they either meet redemption or retreat. The exit is always available, but so is the invitation to stay and evolve into something they never imagined they could become. There's an entirely different rhythm operating through you. One that doesn't thrive on accumulation or scarcity games. The currency you deal in is encoded with integrity, and the system you represent doesn't run on extraction, it runs on overflow. In your paradigm, value is born from originality, and riches are drawn from alignment. You're not just participating in an economy, you're rewriting the operating code of what it means to prosper. Something sacred is reactivating within your system. Not through effort, but recognition. Instructions buried deep within you are surfacing now, bringing online abilities that waited for this very moment. It isn't about becoming someone new, it's about unlocking what's always been coded into your architecture. And as these dormant elements awaken, your influence expands in ways no one can replicate. You're not becoming louder. You're becoming undeniable. The projections they once placed upon you no longer stick. The misunderstandings fall away. Where once you were mistaken for someone easy to extract from, now you emanate a clarity that makes misjudgment impossible. What's shifting isn't your essence, it's your broadcast. The frequency you carry now is only readable to truth. Your domain isn't governed by standard logic. Those who violated your boundaries thought they were playing a simple game. What they didn't realize is that your realm responds with immediate recalibration. When they tamper with your space, consequences don't take the long way around, they arrive instantly, coded into the very fabric of cause and effect. The equilibrium of your space does not permit injustice to linger. The frameworks that surround you are not designed for conquest, they are designed for coherence. When imbalance enters your sphere, it gets restructured. When dishonesty crosses your path, it loses stability. Your world does not require defense, it is defense. You don't need to lift a hand. The structure of your being handles enforcement through resonance alone. Those who tried to manipulate the system didn't know it was a system. They thought they were outmaneuvering a person, not stepping into a field of divine correction. They played by their own rules in your environment, rules that disintegrated the moment they touched your path. And now, they're facing laws they never studied, forces they never believed existed, and consequences they never prepared for. Some missions aren't revealed all at once, they unfold like ancient scrolls, unlocking layer by layer with each moment of clarity. What you once thought was a personal battle now reveals itself as part of a larger restoration, an orchestration so vast that it stretches across timelines, dimensions, and bloodlines. You were never just defending your space. You were seeded into this realm to rethread what was unraveled, to recover brilliance siphoned from humanity's shared inheritance. There's a moment where the ones who took without permission are frozen by the realization that their illusions no longer shield them. They can no longer carry what wasn't meant for them, not because someone is chasing them, but because the energy within what they stole refuses to serve them. They stand in the threshold between who they were and who they could become, and the decision must be made without disguise. Everything altered the moment you stopped second-guessing your role. Not because you gained new tools, but because you remembered what had always been woven into your being. The ones who operated in secrecy now find themselves under a spotlight not meant to shame, but to awaken. The very structures that once rewarded theft are crumbling under the return of original design. And while others feel the weight of reckoning, you are stepping into the frequency of renewal. The restoration flowing toward you isn't measured in compensation, it's saturated in overflow. What's being returned isn't just what was lost, it's the multiplied version, refined through delay, reissued with interest, arriving precisely on time. Every individual who activates this purpose sends a shock through the field. It's not about one person rising, it's about a sequence unlocking. Like tuned instruments syncing in resonance, each awakening amplifies the next. This isn't about celebration for what was regained, it's about the ignition of purpose that ripples through entire realms once one more anchor point holds steady. Your presence signals more than personal breakthrough. It serves as a beacon for what's possible when truth reclaims its place. And when your light stabilizes in full power, those who've been waiting silently in other corners of the world begin to stir. A wave moves, not by force, but by recognition. A network of restorers begins aligning without needing to speak a word. This was never about punishment, it was about realignment. What was taken is finding its way home. What was twisted is unraveling. And what was hidden is stepping into clarity. Your role wasn't to fight fire with fire. It was to ignite a blaze that doesn't burn, but reveals. One by one, the architects of this restoration are rising, and you're among the first that the world will recognize. Everything they thought was settled has been reset at the root. This isn't a simple reversal, it's a recalibration of reality itself. What was extracted without permission is now boomeranging back with multiplied force, refined by time and power. What was buried is emerging under divine pressure. And the role you once played as the underestimated bystander has been permanently retired. You've stepped into authorship, and the story now bends around your vibration. This threshold is more than symbolic, it's a full activation of purpose. Not a call to arms, but a call to build with such divine speed that sabotage becomes irrelevant. The path forward isn't about retaliation. It's about redesign. About establishing a rhythm of creation so profound that imitators lose interest before they begin. This isn't about protecting the past, it's about constructing a future where your presence alone makes corruption obsolete. The shift you've initiated doesn't end with you, it triggers waves across ancestral timelines. You've become the interruption that alters family patterns, the recalibration point for entire spiritual bloodlines. What was once stolen from your lineage is being summoned back through you. Not with force, but with magnetic inevitability. And every breakthrough you birth now belongs not just to you, but to every soul tied to your awakening.